looking at including teenagers in the political process, um, just so that they're involved enough that we can get them this message about, social distancing and health requirements. And they're in some ways in their own world from my own experience. And so Vietnam actually had a really good TikTok video challenge uh, about social distancing and washing for the coronavirus that they put out a month ago. And they've had pretty good results with that. So, you know, as we're learning on the fly, I think we're going to see uh, more interest in youth culture and kind of old people invading it.
Right.
So, it's like we need to interrupt this TikTok video to bring you a PDF.
Well, same thing with Snapchat, and now Facebook is for old people. So it's always going to be something different, and then it's just always got to be evolving that way.
Yeah, it's we saw this year on the federal level, the first person that spent, almost $500 million of his own money. He drove up YouTube advertising prices.
Hmm.
Since this kind of COVID started, I've been exposed to more songs that were advertisements before the video I was watching. Artists or I guess studios or production companies, not even wanting you to actually search for their music, but just putting it in front of you. So it's a very interesting uh, and dynamic time. I'm like I said, it's an opportunity. This is raising consciousness about the importance of what we used to call unskilled labor. Um, and it's also raising consciousness about how you ensure that your workers are healthy.
Right.
Um, the, I'm sure that the police departments are as worried about their officers coming in contact with COVID as, any other company that has employees. But they also have a public service to perform. And so it would seem like they're adjusting just as much as we are. I don't think we'll see nearly as many kind of petty violations and arrests as much as possible. I think traffic will be as much about reckless drivers as it is about speeding or any other particular policy. Um, I think one of the things that we as citizens have to really consider is when the police do start stopping people for violations of, lockdowns, wanting to know essentially where your papers are, whether you have a reason to be out, that we don't use 20th century kind of confrontational tactics with that. Like these are public servants who are just as determined to not get sick as we are. Um, and kind of with that change in the relationship with the public, I think even city programs now have to start to adjust to more taking care of people at home.
Hmm.
I don't know how long it's going to be feasible for there to be, you know, uh, kids at the AISD coming to the school to get food. We can do that as long as possible. But you don't want lines forming. You don't want cross contamination. And
Right.
so I do think that we're kind of looking at a world where delivery becomes really important. And to that end, Arlington has the Via service, which was a people mover, but theoretically could also be a products and goods mover. Um, and kind of along the same levels as the counties, each being their own policy um, head. The city, each individual city is going to be grappling with this. And so I think one of the things we have to look at is what other cities are doing. And if they're showing a positive effect from anything, that we learn from them. Because as much as we can learn from Asian countries, I think we can learn from each other as far as, policies we can put in place, or methods that we can use to improve public health while still delivering resources as well as possible.
Right.
Um, you know, the difference between the Levitt Pavilion having a walk-up crowd versus the Levitt Pavilion streaming their music online. That's a sort of way that to look at the way that public service is going to change. We have to meet people where they are, especially if we're asking them to stay in place. So it's going to be one of those changes.
Yeah, a lot of local restaurants have done very well with now providing, obviously, the curbside takeout, but then also within a certain radius, they've now added delivery because they realize that, unfortunately, a lot of these waiters, waitresses, and, bar staff, they're kind of out of work for the most part. So,
yeah,
but the restaurants still have to stay open. So you're getting the owners, you're getting the chefs, you're getting the people that are there every day actually delivering it to you, which has been great. And I've heard a lot of good response. I mean, I know Amy and I tried to order Thai Texas, for instance, last night. And, within 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, I couldn't get through.
Yeah, they were so busy.
So, I mean, it's still a good sign that a lot of these places are actually still open and still able to give and deliver it to the public the way they, now that I wonder if they're going to keep it after this is all figured out.
Well, I would have to think that restaurants are going to have to change a lot in some ways to more reflect the pizza business, where, there's not a whole lot of inside space anymore for seating or people. Mm-hmm. And it's just consumed by kitchen getting as much food out the door as possible. And so, that's an area where I think we could look at, doing some small business loans and helping businesses kind of retrofit into a more viable delivery service sort of model. Most places, 60% of their restaurant is unused. So, we can find ways to make that more efficient. Again, like if we had, the ability to test our delivery drivers, our frontline workers at all levels, that would be way better for us as a society. But I would imagine, that's coming in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks. But we kind of, as things are changing, we can still look to what we're going to need in a month or so, and say, hey, we should start putting these policies in place so that, when Arlington goes from a dozen to somewhere in the teens, to somewhere in the 20s, to somewhere in the 50s of cases, we have a decent way to encourage people to stay home by making sure that they have all the resources they need. We can't operate on the idea that things are going to get better without any kind of intervention. Things are going to get better because we've figured out how to do better in this new environment. So, I mean, as much as I would love to say that it would be April or May and the hot weather is going to change everything back to normal, we have to, at this point, start planning on the bottom end, saying, we plan for the worst. Let's pretend that in November this disease is still around. How does that affect our elections? With a pandemic in place and disasters, and emergencies, can we just say that everybody is sick? Like there's the threat of sickness on everybody. So is everybody an absentee voter now? Do we move to mail-in elections, which, other states do, and with a higher turnout, mind you, than what we have in Texas. So, it's really causing us to restructure all the different levels of society and its functions, um, in ways that I think are in some ways productive to encouraging turnout. If if this election in November happens and Texas fares worse than other states, is there kind of a viral level that gets people out of office? A rate of cases or a growth in cases where people are like, okay, we can't keep operating with these people leading. Which again, very local on up, but um, it's it's kind of a new avenue of judging politicians. And so I guess let me say this, from my point of view, there's a couple of different parts to politics. There's the campaigning that the politicians do, and at times they'll talk about policies. Then there's the actual voting, which how we do the measuring, and then the actual public administration that comes afterwards is its own area. You can campaign on putting any plan you want into place, but once you get past the voting, that actual policy has to be implemented. So it becomes an issue of how fast can the city change? Is it willing to change? Are we going to be voting for people that are promising us a panacea, a solution or a cure, or they're going to speed up the vaccine or something like that, instead of being focused on what are we going to do about the next unemployment report. This last one was 3.3 million, which is 4 times larger than ever before. And conceivably over the next 3 months, those numbers will continue to rise. So, if we look at fewer people in the country being employed, then the people that are employed are supporting more people. And so, do wages go up to reflect that? We've had a federal stimulus bill of $2 trillion that I think is through the House and Senate. I don't know if they've reconciled it and presented it to the president yet, but
yeah, he signed it yesterday.
Oh, well, I guess I've been in a little bit too much of a cocoon, but it's where people were very scared of socialism not too long ago. Checks going out to every single citizen that files taxes, I think, is basically the way they've done it. Is all of a sudden a very acceptable policy, one that has broad bipartisan support. The Republicans even floated with a UBI kind of in the style of Andrew Yang, that over months could be, one of the larger subsidies of the public ever. At the same time, they're also throwing an amazing amount of money into the stock market / large corporations through some of the other programs within that 2 trillion, where we're just as likely to see a disparity of wealth that goes beyond anything that's ever been on the record historically. It's interesting that a century ago we had sort of a gilded age that led into the Spanish flu, and then there was the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression. But we're seeing easily that kind of disturbance and changes in society that